Hello everybody, and welcome to my Khans of Tarkir draft guide. In this video, I will be providing you with all of the information you need to find success in your Khans of Tarkir drafts. The first thing you need to know about Khans of Tarkir is that it is a 3-color format, which means you will almost always be playing one of the supported 3-color wedges. Sometimes this will come in the form of 2 main colors while splashing the third, sometimes it will be straight 3-color, but the point is that you will need to adjust the way you draft. The 5 3-color combinations are Abzan, Jeskai, Sultai, Mardu, and Temur. Abzan is a deck that cares about +1/+1 counters. It uses the Outlast mechanic to win stalled board states and counter payoffs to power up its creatures. Jeskai is a deck that cares about spells. It uses the Prowess mechanic to power up its creatures, along with a flurry of non-creature spells to push through a bunch of damage seemingly out of nowhere. Sultai is a deck that cares about the graveyard. It uses the Delve mechanic, combined with cards that fill its graveyard, to cast powerful spells at discounted rates. This helps Sultai pull ahead in the mid to late game. Mardu is the most aggressive deck in the format. It uses the Raid mechanic, which rewards attacking to get advantages early, and hopefully can snowball that advantage into victory while the rest of the archetypes are still setting up. Often, Mardu is more likely to be a 2-color deck that dabbles in a 3rd color, as Black-White Warriors and Red-White Beatdown are both somewhat supported. It is still likely that you will want to dip into a 3rd color to add some power to your deck, but having a strong 2-color base will help you come out of the gates swinging. Temur is a deck that cares about big creatures. It gets to utilize the Ferocious mechanic, which is a nice payoff for having creatures with 4 power. Once Temur gets some creatures in play, it can set up some big attacks with maybe a key spell to help force through damage. As you can see, each of the main archetypes has an underlying mechanic that does a pretty good job of encompassing what the deck is trying to do. However, powerful spells are still the key to winning games at the end of the day, so don't ignore great cards just because they don't have your archetype's signature mechanic. Delve spells are a great example of this, because every archetype is going to fill its graveyard to some degree, and will usually be able to support 1 or 2 Delve spells naturally. Another thing about the main archetypes is that it creates an incentive to prioritize enemy colors early in the draft. A color combination like Black-White can fit into either Abzan or Mardu, while a color combination like Black-Red can just fit into Mardu. If I am drafting and first pick a black card, it makes sense to follow that up with a white card over a red card second if that pick is close, since it leaves me with more flexibility. For reference, these are the 5 enemy color pairs. Now that you know about the main archetypes, it is time to talk about how you enable all these colors. The absolute key is going to be the lands. Gain lands come into play tapped, and can produce 2 colors of mana. These are worth prioritizing at the same level as solid playables, since they are guaranteed to make your deck if they are in your colors, and will make sure you can cast all of your colorful spells. Early in a draft, the enemy colored lands have a bit more value, since as we already mentioned, they have more potential homes, but all of the gain lands are good. Tri-lands are uncommons that come into play tapped and can produce 3 colors of mana. They are incredibly high picks, since they can single-handedly set up your entire mana base. Even if you end up in a color combination that only includes 2 of the colors of your tri-land, they are still solid. Prioritize these over all but the most premium of spells, and you won't regret it. Just so you're familiar with the artwork to look for, here are the 5 tri-lands. Now that you have a grasp of the archetypes and the lands that will enable those archetypes, I want to guide you through the most complex part of the gameplay, morphs. A morph is a creature that can be played face down as a morph for 3 generic mana, and flipped face up later. One of the reasons Khans of Tarkir works as such a colorful format is that even if you are missing one of your colors, you can almost always just play a morph on turn 3, so you can still affect the board while you set up your mana. As a result, morphs are very good across the board, even if the base rate doesn't necessarily look that special. For example, Woolly Loxodon is one of the best green cards you can ask for, since it simultaneously gives you a turn 3 play and a late game creature that dominates the board, and is a great place to sink some mana. There are also 3-color morphs that can easily be played early while you work on finding the mana needed to flip them. Morphs with late game applications or utility are the ones you will want to prioritize, as morphs that flip into low-powered creatures have a bit less usefulness. I want to emphasize that even weaker morphs are solid cards, because the morph mechanic provides tons of versatility and power to any card that has it. The gameplay of morphs is quite complex, since you can never really know for sure what is hiding face down. However, the designers created the Rule of 5 to make things a bit easier to parse. The Rule of 5 is that a morph cannot flip to win combat against another morph for less than 5 mana. That means if your opponent has less than 5 lands in play, you can feel confident trading morphs in combat, as they will have to use a combat trick to win the battle and won't just be able to eat your creature by flipping. Cheap unmorphs with good abilities can still be quite useful, but you don't have to worry about them blowing you out in combat. One final thing about the morph mechanic is that you cannot respond to an unmorph ability, so if you have a spell that does small damage and want to take out a morph, use it on your turn, because once they spend the mana to flip the morph, you can't respond. Now that you know more about prioritizing lands and understand how morphs function, we can introduce the 5-color archetype. This is a deck where you heavily prioritize the lands, even more than usual, taking them over all but the strongest of cards. If you are able to get enough lands, you will be able to support playing all 5 colors, which means you will often have incredibly high card quality. Morphs are great in this archetype because you can cast them face down early while you find all your colors, and flip them later when you have your mana established. As a bonus, your opponent will have a hard time knowing which morphs they are because you will have so many colors available to flip them. Hidden Plans excels in this deck and is a card that can lead you toward this archetype. If you want to draft this deck, I cannot stress enough how highly you will need to take the lands. You want to have like 10 of them, really as many as you can get, so draft accordingly. You now understand the archetypes, including the 5-color deck, the importance of prioritizing lands, and the way morphs function. Next, I want to talk about the speed of the format because it will change the way you draft. Khans of Tarkir is a slow format. This is for several reasons that are pretty easy to explain. First, players gain a decent chunk of extra life because of the gain lands, so it is almost as if life totals start out above 20. This makes it harder for aggro. Second, morphs are not fundamentally strong attackers, since 3-mana 2/2s aren't the biggest form of pressure. Finally, since many players are playing powerful 3-color decks, it is often going to take a bit longer to deploy spells. As a result, Khans of Tarkir is slower. What does this mean for you as a drafter? Well, for starters, it means you really don't need to prioritize random bad 2-drops. If your deck has less 2-drops than you are used to, that is totally fine. But cards like Highland Game and Wetland Sandbar are not worth playing to try and add to your early drop count, though you can sideboard them in if you feel it is necessary. Next, mana sinks are better. Games are going to go to the late game, you are going to have time to dump mana into big plays. One of the reasons morphs are so good is that they give you a place to spend your mana without needing a dedicated mana sink. Card draw is a nice way to pull ahead on resources and also ensure you continually spend your mana. Additionally, clunky removal is better. Since games last a while, you will have time to deploy a 6-mana kill spell if you need to play one, and cards like Killshot and Smite the Monstrous get better too, since you will have more time to line up a good target. Finally, you can keep slow hands, which is another way of saying you don't need to mulligan as much, since you are much less likely to be punished by a fast start, and the extra resources are important. So now you understand the archetypes, the importance of lands, the way morphs work, and that Khans is a slow format. Let's round this guide out with a grab bag of helpful information. The first thing I want to say here is that Khans is generally a format where you play 18 lands. This is for a combination of all the things we've talked about in this guide. The archetypes are colorful, so 18 lands help you fit more colored sources in your deck. Morphs give you a great way to spend your mana in the late game, and you will also be playing more late game card advantage and expensive cards since it is a slow format. You want to be able to keep more opening hands since resources are important. Finally, playing 18 lands means that even with all of the tap lands you are playing, you will still be able to have an untapped land when you need one to hit a key play on curve. Now, let's showcase the common morphs in each color so you don't get caught unawares. There is also one common morph for each of the wedges. Next, here are the common combat tricks in each color, though combat tricks are not a major part of this format because morphs already make combat pretty complicated. As far as traps, banners are quite bad, so don't rely on them for fixing. Turn 3 is a key turn in Khans, since that is when you start deploying morphs, so playing a banner on that turn is really suboptimal. Try to avoid these. Finally, Khans is very archetype based, and many of the cards are designed for specific decks. In sets like these, it is hard to give a ranking of commons to take, and it is more important than ever to have a plan and make sure your cards fit in that game plan. With that being said, if you are looking for guidance on early picks, I recommend taking cards that have high raw power level that you can work towards, regardless of color. Cards like that can give you a good direction for your draft, and since Khans is about playing multiple colors, it is much less risky to spend early picks on those cards. In terms of monocolored options, good removal spells like Debilitating Injury are always in demand, with Injury getting a bump in this format for efficiently killing morphs. And strong morphs, like Woolly Loxodon, are also coveted, since they are flexible and fit into every deck. Anyway, that is going to do it for this draft guide. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy it, remember to hit that like button, subscribe for more videos, comment if you have any questions or feedback, and to let me know you made it all the way till the end of this video, leave hashtag ClassicCons in the comments section down below, because you're hopefully a lot more prepared to draft this all-time great format, and one of my personal favorites. I hope you feel ready to dive into your Cons of Tarkir drafts, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you on Tarkir.